the quiet village of Umugu, Amanda was a legend wrapped in a green and gold apron. At 33, her soft brown skin glowed with the warmth of countless hours spent over cooking fires, and her gentle smile could silence even the most persistent village gossips. Her pepper soup was more than food. It was medicine, comfort, and magic all stirred into one steaming bowl. Amanda's husband Michael had once been different. 10 years ago in the city, his dark skin would shine with genuine laughter, his tall frame moving with the confidence of a man who truly loved his wife. But village life had twisted him into something cruel and secretive. Now his handsome face bore the permanent smirk of arrogance, and his well-built physique was always dressed in expensive clothes that he flaunted like badges of superiority. The other village women watched Michael with knowing eyes. Mama Oyama, her elderly neighbor with silver-streaked hair always wrapped in colorful headtees, would shake her graying head whenever she saw him strutting past in his tailored cap and designer shoes. "That man is feeding something else," she'd whisper to Amanda, her weathered dark hands gesturing toward the path that led to the herbwoman's compound outside town. But Amanda kept silent, channeling her growing frustration into every carefully prepared meal. Every perfectly seasoned pot of soup that made the village chief himself request her cooking for special ceremonies. The truth crashed into Amanda's world on an ordinary market morning. While selecting fresh uziza leaves, her dark hands moving expertly through the green pile, she overheard two young girls giggling behind her. Their conversation was about a fine man who brought expensive gifts to the herbwoman, a man whose distinctive leather shoes they described in perfect detail. Amanda's breath caught as she recognized Michael's signature footwear. Her heart began to boil like the broth she was planning to prepare, but her face remained serene, that legendary smile never wavering even as her world crumbled around her. The village women continued their shopping, unaware that Amanda's mind was already turning toward something darker than any soup she had ever cooked. By the time she walked home through the dusty village paths, her plan had begun to form like ingredients slowly coming together in a pot. Tonight, Michael would taste something he had never experienced before, the bitter flavor of his own truth. As the sun set over Umugu, Amanda moved through her kitchen with the precision of a master chef preparing her greatest masterpiece. Her dark fingers worked methodically, grinding spices on the stone with movements that had become as natural as breathing. But tonight, her usual cooking rhythm carried a different energy, deliberate, focused, and tinged with the quiet power of a woman who had finally reached her breaking point. Michael stumbled through their front door, his tall frame swaying slightly from palm wine, his dark skin glistening with sweat and guilt. His bloodshot eyes barely registered Amanda's presence as he kicked off those infamous designer shoes that had given away his secret. His once handsome face was now bloated with arrogance and alcohol. "Hope you cooked something sweet today," he mumbled, collapsing into his chair with the careless grace of a man who had never doubted his welcome. Amanda's smile was radiant, her brown skin seeming to glow in the firelight. "Oh, I cooked something unforgettable," she replied, her voice carrying the musical quality that had once made Michael fall in love with her. The pepper soup Amanda placed before him looked ordinary, rich, aromatic, swimming with perfectly cooked meat and stockfish. But hidden within its depths was the result of her midnight visit to Mama Abba, the ancient spice vendor whose lined, dark face held secrets older than the village itself. The elderly woman's knowing eyes had twinkled as she handed Amanda a bundle wrapped in red cloth, her gray-haired head nodding with understanding. "Boil this with your truth," Mama Abba had whispered, her weathered hands pressing the mysterious herbs into Amanda's palm. Now, as Michael devoured the soup with his usual lack of appreciation, Amanda sat across from him, watching every bite like a scientist observing a crucial experiment. Her dark eyes never left his face as he consumed spoonful after spoonful of what would become his confession. The transformation began subtly. Michael's chewing slowed, his dark brow furrowed in confusion. His phone buzzed continuously on the table, but for once he ignored it completely. The aroma of the soup filled their small home, rich with the smoky promise of justice finally being served. This tastes like truth," Michael muttered, his voice already beginning to shake. As the herbs worked their way through his system, his hands trembled as he set down the spoon, and his eyes, once sharp with cunning, now dilated with the panic of a man losing control of his carefully constructed lies. What happened next would be whispered about in Umugu for generations. Michael's handsome face contorted as uncontrollable laughter burst from his lips, not the laughter of joy, but the desperate sound of a man whose secrets were clawing their way out of his throat. The herbs had done their work, and truth flowed from him like water from a broken dam. His dark skin grew pale as he confessed everything: the money given to the love priestess, the charms designed to silence Amanda's womb, his plans to secretly marry a younger woman while keeping Amanda as his stepping stone to wealth. Each word tumbled out against his will, his tall frame shaking with the effort of trying to stop the avalanche of truth. Amanda listened to every confession with the calm of a woman who had suspected much but finally heard it all confirmed. Her brown face remained serene, beautiful in its terrible composure. When Michael finally slumped forward, his tongue swollen not from the herbs, but from the shame of his exposed lies, Amanda stood with the grace of a queen. She poured the remaining soup into the sand outside their home, then turned back to her broken husband. "Good," she said, her voice carrying the finality of judgment. "You are finally full of something other than yourself." By morning, Amanda had transformed. Gone was the quietly suffering village wife. In her place stood a woman radiant with purpose, her dark skin glowing with newfound freedom. She packed her precious spices, her cooking pots, and most importantly, her dignity. The bright yellow Ankara dress she chose, one Michael had once mocked as too loud, now shimmered with pride as she prepared to leave the only home she had, known as a married woman. The village women gathered as Amanda walked through Umugu's dusty streets one final time. Their own dark faces reflected admiration and quiet approval as they watched her carry herself with the poise of someone who had reclaimed her power. Chief Obina himself, a distinguished elderly man with tribal marks etched into his weathered cheeks, approached with an envelope. "The council would like you to train our daughters," he said, his voice heavy with respect. "Teach them your kind of cooking." Amanda's smile was radiant as she adjusted her head wrap. "Not just the cooking, Chief. The seasoning of wisdom, too." Behind her, Michael remained slumped in his chair, too weak and ashamed to even watch her leave. The clay pot she left behind on the fire, filled with eternally boiling water, would become his constant reminder of what he had lost through his greed and betrayal. In the neighboring town of Umbano, Amanda bloomed like a flower finally given proper soil and sunlight. Her arrival caused an immediate sensation, not just because of her legendary cooking skills, but because of the quiet power that seemed to radiate from her very being. Her dark skin seemed to glow with an inner light that drew people to her like moths to flame. The town hall invited her for what they thought would be a simple cooking demonstration. Instead, Amanda stood before the gathered crowd, women with faces marked by their own struggles, young girls hungry for wisdom, even a few brave men who sensed something important was happening, and spoke about respect, betrayal, and the art of reclaiming one's worth. Her weekly wisdom feasts became legendary. Women would arrive carrying their own stories of pain, their dark faces etched with years of silent suffering. Amanda would guide them in preparing meals while they shared their experiences, each dish becoming a recipe for healing. Widows found their voices, wives discovered their strength, and young girls learned that their worth was not measured by their ability to serve others, but by their capacity to honor themselves. "Your soup is not just food," one woman whispered during a particularly emotional session. "It is fire." Amanda's smile was radiant as she stirred the large pot that fed them all. "Fire purifies," she replied. "It burns, but it also warms." Meanwhile, back in Umugu, Michael's world had become a living nightmare. His once proud dark skin had grown ashen and gaunt. The man who had strutted through the village in designer clothes now couldn't even visit the barber shop without facing whispers and pointing fingers. Children ran past his house as if it were cursed, and women crossed the street to avoid walking near his compound. The eternally boiling pot Amanda had left behind became the stuff of legend. Villagers claimed they could hear it muttering names, and some swore they saw Amanda's face in the rising steam. Every time Michael tried to touch it, his fingers would tingle and his stomach would twist with memories of his wife's quiet strength and his own spectacular failure. Years passed, and Amanda's influence spread far beyond Umbano. She established a culinary school where young women learned not just cooking techniques, but life skills rooted in dignity and self-respect. Her cookbook, Lies and Truth, became a bestseller, each recipe paired with wisdom about relationships, self-worth, and the power of authenticity. Michael eventually found the humility to seek redemption. He appeared at Amanda's school, his once handsome face now marked by genuine remorse, and asked quietly if he could help. Amanda looked at this broken man, her former husband who had tried to reduce her to nothing, and saw an opportunity for teaching. She handed him a wooden spoon and put him to work in her kitchen, not as her husband but as a student learning the value of service without expectation of reward. The village watched in amazement as the man who had once mocked cooking as women's work now swept floors and prepared stockfish under Amanda's patient guidance. "You lost what you never valued," Amanda told him one afternoon as they worked side by side, "but now you are learning to taste slowly." The annual Truth Feast in Umugu became a celebration that drew visitors from across the region. Amanda would stand before the great cooking pot, her mature beauty enhanced by wisdom and experience, and tell her story to crowds of women and men eager to learn about authenticity, respect, and the transformative power of truth. As the sun set, on another successful feast, Amanda wrote in her journal, "He wanted to control my flame, but I became fire." The woman who had once been dismissed as just a village woman with a big spoon had become a beacon of strength, proving that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply becoming everything your oppressor said you could never be.